Okay, so a few of you had some questions over the homework, so I'm going to take a few minutes to go over that. One thing I want to remind you of on fractions, if I have 2/3 x equals 6, the way that I get rid of a fraction, I don't want to divide a fraction by a fraction. Instead, I multiply by its reciprocal. And take a minute to try to understand why this is. 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 over 6 is just 1, and 1 times x leaves me with just x. So please notice that anytime I multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, I am always going to get 1, and 1 times a variable is always just that variable. So that is why when we're trying to get rid of a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal. We know with the properties of equality, whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other side. So I'm going to come over here and multiply by 3 over 2, and I get x equals 9. So just a quick reminder on how to do that. Okay, next I want to look at number 56. Number 56 says, in a recent year, the annual salary of the governor of New York was $179,000. Probably important information. During the same year, the annual salary of the governor of Tennessee was $94,000 less than that. So write and solve an equation to find the annual salary of the governor of Tennessee in that year. So write and solve an equation to find the annual salary of the governor of Tennessee in that year. Well, what's it even asking for? It's asking for us to find the governor of Tennessee's salary. So we should probably give that a variable. So we'll say S equals the governor of Tennessee's salary. I'm sorry, I'm writing with my fingers, so it's a little sketchy, but that's okay. So how would we find that? Well, if we know the governor of New York made $179,000, we're going to subtract, since it was less, $94,000 less than that, we're going to subtract $94,000 from that, and that's going to give me the governor of Tennessee's actual salary. So if you do the math here, we should get that his salary was approximately, or exactly actually, it was at $85,000. I wouldn't mind that salary. How about you? Alright, next one, number 59. During the season, 13% of the players who signed up for the soccer league dropped out. A total of 174 players finished the season. So part A says to assign a variable and write an expression for the number of players who finished the season and explain your reasoning. So let's do piece by piece, part A first. So if I'm looking at part A, we've got to assign our variable, so we'll just let P be the number of players. Okay, P equals the number of players. And then it says, write an expression for the number of players who finished the season. Well, we know that there was 100% altogether that started off, right? And then 13% dropped out. So if 13% dropped out, that means that 87% of the players finished, right? 87%. So I'm going to write that as 0.87% of the players ended up finishing. So P represents the number of players who signed up for the soccer league. So 0.87p is my expression for the number of players who finished this season. Once again, that's because 13% that dropped out. So if 13% dropped out, that means there's a remaining 87% still playing. So 0.87p represents the number of players who finished the season. Okay, so part B says then to write an equation for the number of players who signed up, or to find the number who signed up. Well, it tells us that 174 finished the season. So we know that that 87% of the players is equal to 174. So of those who signed up, only 174 finished. So now make sure you get that there's a decimal point there. We've got to calculate part C, then how many signed up for the soccer league. So if it's 0.87 times P, to get that P all by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 0.87. The division property of equality says whatever I divide one side by, I have to do to the other. Once again, remember, .87 over .87 is just a fancy looking 1. 1 times P leaves me with P. So there was P number of players, and 174 divided by .87 gives me a total of 200. So now, make sure that it makes sense in terms of the problem. P was the number of players who signed up. So would it make sense that 200 signed up, 13% dropped out, and left me with 174 to finish? That sounds pretty accurate. I have more to begin with. 13% dropped out, leaving 174. Those numbers seem to all work together. So we know we probably didn't make an error anywhere. Okay, number 99. It asks which one doesn't belong. Identify the equation that does not belong with the other three and justify your conclusion. So if I'm looking at this, I think, okay, well, they all have an n. There's some plus, there's some minus, so that can't be what it's looking for the one that doesn't belong. So maybe I should figure out what n equals on each of them. So I'm going to subtract 14 from both sides here. So on this problem, n equals 27 minus 14 would be 13. Once again, I'm trying to get n by itself, so I subtract 12 from both sides. So 25 subtract 12 is 13. Those both look the same, so that seems good. Here I'm going to add 16 since it's a minus 16. If I add 16 to both sides, I get n equals, what would that be, 30, 41? I don't know, that's different. Now if I add 4 over here to both sides of the equation, I get n equals 13. So now I can quickly see which one doesn't belong. This one's n equals 13, this equals n equals 13, this one's n equals 13. So this must be my equation that does not belong, because when I solve for n equals 41. And the other three, n equals 13. And then the last one is number 103. It says, how would you solve 5x equals 35, and how would you solve 5 plus x equals 35? How are the methods similar? How are they different? Well, 5x equals 35. How would I solve that? I always look at the variable. What is happening to that x? Right now, it's being multiplied by 5. When you have a number right beside a variable, that implies multiplication. 5 times x equals 35. So to get that x by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 5. The properties of equality, division property of equality says whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. Why would I divide by 5? 5 divided by 5 is nothing more than 1. 1 times x just leaves me with x. 35 divided by 5 is 7. Okay, so how would I solve 5 plus x equals 35? Well, let's look at what's different. Now I've got a plus sign in between the 5 and the x, whereas here there was nothing in between them. In this one, that implied multiplication, but here I realize it's addition. So I've got this 5 being added to x. I need to get rid of that to isolate the x. I want to isolate the term with x in it. That means I want to get it all by itself on this side of the equal sign. So if I have 5 and I need to get rid of it, I'm going to subtract 5. If what the subtraction property of equality says whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. And the reason that I would subtract 5 is because what is 5 take away 5? Well, that's 0. So if I have 5 take away 5 is 0, now I'm left with x. 35 take away 5 is 30, so x equals 30. So how could I explain the methods that are similar? Well, the only thing that I did that's similar is I used the properties of equality on both problems. What's different is, one, I used the division property of equality, and on the other problem, I used the subtraction property of equality. I hope that helped with the homework. If you have any more questions, please stop by my room and see me for extra help during tutoring, or you're more than welcome to shoot me a message on Facebook Messenger, and I can try to help you on there and send you a video as well. Have a great day.